Satire. Here on Top 5 Friday, we have a tendency to most times talk about positive things. A list of top 5 bests, if you will. But today, I'd like to get a little bitter and upset. Yeah, I want to focus on some worsts out there. Today, I bring you the top 5 worst video game sequels. Let's get angry. Real angry.
5.
First up is a game that most people took issue to when it was introduced to the franchise, and I'm looking at Resident Evil 5. Though co-op was a cool feature on its own right, it unfortunately took away the scary of the game. It was just calming to know that while you're shooting away at those infected guys shooting back at you, which is another problem with the game, you had someone covering your back at all times. The survival aspect of this game was taken out of the survival horror genre and was just turned into a third-person shooter. It's a good game on its own, it's just a bad Resident Evil game.
4.
Next up is a classic, possibly the first sequel any of us ever played, Super Mario Bros. 2. In fact, it was kind of hardly a sequel in the first place when you think about it. It was, in fact, just a reskinned version of this other Japanese platformer game. Now, here's the kicker. There actually was a Mario 2 that was only released in Japan because it was deemed too difficult for an American audience. This game you could actually play on the Super Nintendo in Super Mario All-Stars, where, in fact, this game was insanely difficult, so touché Japan, you were a little right, but still. So that's why when you play Super Mario Bros. 2, you don't see any Goombas or any other recognizable enemies, not even a Bowser in there. So, hey, the more you know.
And knowing is half the battle.
3 comes to us from one of my favorite developers, but even I have to shake my fist at Dragon Age 2. Now, I will admit that up front, they did go ahead and fix things like combat and controls. They made it more action-based and less RTS-based like the first game. But again, that comes down to just a matter of opinion which one you liked more. The big problem, though, was it took away everything that was great from the first game. You couldn't even just meet up and have conversations with your teammates, which was so great about the first game, so pivotal. Also, you were forced to have a specific character and you couldn't change their appearance. It went from being a very open game to being very linear. The only plus here was that if you played the game before Origins, you really didn't know what you were missing.
2.
Next on our list is a game that will forever have a place in video game history as the most delayed game ever. And that's Duke Nukem Forever. The game, I'm so funny. The game, for whatever reason, could not see the light of day, and it kept getting delayed for a whopping 10 years. It had become a joke in its own right. Big problem here was that though Duke Nukem kicked some serious ass in the 90s, his audience grew up, and yet the game never did in the course of that 10 years. The jokes were completely outdated and never made more relevant as the game got older. Plus, could the game really live up to its own hype? When Gearbox Studios took over and forced the game to completion, it just made you think that maybe some things just don't need to exist. This game may have been one of those things.
1.
Duke Nukem Forever is number 1 on a lot of people's lists, but for me, he was overshadowed by a much more demonic demon of a game. Yes, a demonic demon of a game. For me, the worst sequel of all time actually came from one of my favorite IPs. Star Wars The Force Unleashed 2 was the biggest load of crap I'd ever played. And I've tried to give this argument to you guys before, and so many of you came out to defend it. Well, you're wrong. The first game had such a gripping story that combined the expanded universe with the canon universe, and it worked so smoothly. This game's story was pathetic and non-existent at most. You spent the entire game arguing if you were actually you or if you were a clone, and saying that there actually couldn't make any Jedi clones. But what happens at the end of the game? You fight a bunch of cloned versions. The end of the game contradicts everything that was just being talked about the entire game. Plus, there were all these shots of Boba Fett in the marketing for Force Unleashed 2, and in the game, you see him like twice, and only in cutscenes. Oh, and Starkiller can't stop bitching about this girl that he's so in love with. It's like, oh, I need to find Juno, I need to find Juno. So he spends the entire game looking for her. The entire game is him looking for her, which he never finds. Ever! The combat was cool and all, but you could just beat the entire game by throwing each enemy off the ledge, so there's never any need to like try out the different combos. You just threw an enemy, they're dead. Throw an enemy, they're dead. It was repetitive and not difficult at all. I will take it to my grave that this is the worst sequel of all time. Man, that felt good. Just to rant and feel hate towards some games. You know what, I really needed that today, so thank you for letting me just get that all out there. Anywho, let me know if you agree with my list, but more importantly, what do you think are the worst sequels of all time? Let me know in the comments below, or you can actually hit me up on Twitter at @thejovenshire and send them to me there, and I'll respond to you guys, because I love talking to you. So thank you so much for watching, and hey, we'll see you again soon.